pleasant morning to you out there. The program is the Dailies on Echo Television, where we look at various stories that are making it rounds on the paper this morning. I am Sada Elisha Dasham, and I'll be doing the program together with Rachel Tansy. Good morning.
Good morning, Sarah.
How you doing?
I'm fine. How about you?
I'm great. Thank you so much. And remember, our viewers and supporters, you can follow us live on Facebook and on YouTube. Drop your comment, your views on any of the story that is of interest to you this morning, and we shall go into the paper. Rachel will be taking us through the first paper.
On Nigerian Tribune, 42,000 nurses have left Nigeria in 3 years, a report from the federal government. Access Holdings appoints Bolaji Apede as acting group CEO. Reps get bill for creation of Okeogun, Ijebu, Ife, Ijesa states in Southwest. Step down bill seeking to increase mandatory qualification for president, VP, governors, and deputies. You can find details on page 29. Tinubu honors Super Eagles players with MON and Lance. You can find details at the back page. And then we have a picture story showing a warm welcome from the president and the vice president together with the entire Super Eagle team. Why Nigerians' forex reserve will drop to $24 billion in 2024, a report coming from IMF. You can find details of that prediction on page 6. The big story on the paper, economic hardship. Federal government knocks PDP governor, says most of them owe workers and pensioners. The writer saying blames them for not paying 30,000 minimum wage, wants them to state how they are supporting farmers. Says despite hardship, Nigeria nowhere near what is happening in Venezuela. Economy very strong. In as much as we are not close to Venezuela, Sele, our economy is not very strong. Most commodity board to tackle price volatility, plans deployment of security forces to protect farmers. You can find details on page 11. Documents used to pay election observers $6.2 million neither from Buhari nor my office, says ex-SGF Mustafa. This is on the MFLA's hearing and trial currently going on. Started yesterday. There was a proceeding yesterday, and then these are some of the things that are coming out, some of the revelations. Still on Nigerian Tribune, we create spaces where black individuals redefine their narratives, access unprecedented opportunities. This is coming from Dr. Francisca Fajimi, founder Your Black Matters. You can find details on page 22, and that's all the news on Nigerian Tribune.
On the Blueprint newspaper, still on the issue of the election observers, Buhari's signature was forged to release $6.2 million. Ex-SGF Mustafa tells the court. You can find detail on page 6. And here we're having the minister urges states and wealthy Nigerians on commodity radios. That's talking about World Radio Day. That was yesterday. So here we're seeing the minister urging states and wealthy Nigerians on community radios. And I think that will really help in the long way. We have community radios, especially with the issue of insecurity and all of that. So we look forward to seeing how the ministers will work together with the community so we can have more radio stations in our various communities. Also, we are having, I will return to my South Africa club despite threat. This is coming from One Village. You can find more of that story. Remember, we saw there was a threat concerning the issue of his club in South Africa. And here we see he's returning, even though there was a deal for him in Saudi Arabia. But he's saying he's returning. So you can look up that story inside the paper. And on food security, federal government more commodity board to tackle prices, volatility, and others. With the rider, we will deploy security forces to protect farmers, activate more farmlands, coming from Shaitima. Why we sell warehouses hoarding food items. This is coming from Kanu government. You can find more detail of that inside the paper. Your conduct belittles your office. Federal government fires the PDP governor. Still on the issue of Venezuela claim. You can find more detail of them. And we have a writer that says wants them to account for increased revenue from subsidy removal. More detail of that can be found in the paper. Tinubu confides MON national honors on Super Eagles players. Other stories on the front page of the paper. Democracy in Nigeria dead if PDP goes under. Coming from Wabara. Adile Kazan, we have headship of African solid minerals ministers groundbreaking coming from stakeholders. More detail of that can be found in the paper. Master bakers threaten nationwide strike February 27th. Enugu sachet water producers too. We're seeing that the hardship is really biting hard on all of these small businesses and medium business. And here we're seeing that master bakers are threatening nationwide strike. Of course, with the prices of all of the things that are needed for baking, you will agree that they might. So we hope that before then, the federal government will be able to come up with some modalities to actually help all of the small and medium businesses so they can flood on water concerning the issue of hardship. And we still have our gallant Super Eagles in a picture with the president. That was after the breakfast they had yesterday at the Aso Villa, and that's all on Blueprint newspaper.
On the Guardian newspaper, the big story: National Assembly outrage over 100 billion naira constituency projects push for 20% of budget. We have information that says National Assembly wants 20% of the budget despite receiving at least 2 trillion naira yearly allocation for constituency projects. We have 109 senators, 360 reps, 100 billion naira yearly allocation for constituency projects, and we can say we haven't been feeling the impact of 100 billion in our constituency. We just hope that this time around the 10th House of Assembly will do better for Nigerians. Three firms lose 140 billion naira to naira devaluation. Illicit drug ban, addicts explore cemeteries for alternatives. That is sad. You can find details on page 27. Master bakers, caterers to commence strike February 27. Federal government considers commodity board to crash food prices as court ultimatum ends. Knock kudos for Oshun lawmakers over proposed bill on state creation. Oil production drops leaves 2024 budget with 400,000 barrel per day deficit, and this was one of our major concerns looking at the projection and estimate from the National Assembly. You can't assume that your oil production will be higher where it's literally actually dropping. We are not meeting our quota. OPEC has cut us from 1.8 million barrel per day to 1.5, and we are not still reaching the 1.5. The highest we had last year was 1.4 million, and it has been up and down, up and down, up and down. And now we are starting the year 2024 400,000 barrel per day deficit. Let's wait and see how the Nigerian government will do about funding the 2024 budget. Lagos Assembly decries naira depreciation, suggests ways to strengthen currency. Mustafa denies authorizing CBN's release of $6.2 million for 2023 polls. You can find details on page 3, and that's all the news on the Guardian newspaper.
On this day newspaper, NLC strike notice. Federal government pushes for fair, sustainable minimum wage. Begins talk with labor with the rider. Pleads with NLC and TUC to withdraw strike warning. To resume payment of wage award this week. Labour foresees stalemate in negotiation for the new minimum wage. Kick against panel composition. National Assembly vows to enforce payment of living wage to workers, so we'll hold the National Assembly to their word. You can find more detail of that on page 38 of this day. And we have NUPRC says plan to conduct closed bid round for oil and gas block legal. Detail of that can be found on page 8. Stop playing to gallery. Federal government blasts opposition governors. Insists nation's economy remains strong. Says abnormalities in state impacting hardship. You can find more of the detail of that story inside the paper. Tinubu speak with grieving Harvard Wigwin's parents, comforts the couple. Ghana's president also calls in and offers his condolences. We lost a gem, bright star Osibanjo Obaseki, others declare. Kogi Cross River Governor Zenith Bank commiserate with the family and with Access Holding. You are irreplaceable, says the ex-emir of Kano, Sanusi. And also the emir of Zawzaw, his dead, a great personal loss. Herbert was a first class guy coming from Wale Tinubu. You can find more detail of all of this condolences inside the paper. We have a picture here where we can see Yeson Wiki also with the family there telling them to please stay strong. You can find more detail of all of the stories and more inside the paper.
On Daily Sun newspaper, AFCON 2023, Tinubu rewards Super Eagles with national honors and houses. Federal government begs NLC TUC to withdraw strike notice, pledges to resume payment of wage award. We stand by our ultimatum, a statement from Ajero. Bread makers begin strike February 27. You can find details on page 6 and 50. Catholic bishops, Nigeria sick in ICU, says leaders overwhelmed. Federal government considers setting up commodity board. This is to tackle food crisis. Calls for interministerial partnership to end hunger. You're playing to the gallery. Federal government replies PDP governors. Tinubu to commission about power plan February 24th. Governor Umba inaugurates Enugu Security Trust Fund, projects 20 billion naira for security. Reps rejects bill to make first degree compulsory for contesting election. You can find details on page 51. At the downside of the paper, Access Bank names Abede new Access Holding CEO, and that's all the news on Daily Sun newspaper.
Richard, in as much as I agree with the reps reject the bill to make first class compulsory for contesting election, I also hope that they'll make sure that education is being made a very serious issue, especially when it comes to contesting elections. It doesn't matter what degree you have, but let's just be sure that you've attained a particular standard of education. Let Nigerians be sure that, you know, whoever is running whatever position is actually intellectually capable to handle certain things, because we've seen of leaders that, I mean, it's more or less they really do not even when they are reading the speech, you could really tell that this is not coming from them. Yes, there's nothing wrong when the speech was written for you. There's no problem with that. But when you're just reading and you really don't have an idea what you're saying to Nigerians, that is where the problem is. So in as much as first class, I mean, we've seen of people who buy results. So it's not a big deal to actually have that. But we're looking at leaders that actually know what Nigerians want at a time like this and making sure that, you know what, our educational standard will not go down with the way things are happening. Now, another thing that is of concern to me is Catholic bishops are saying Nigeria is sick and it's in ICU. Of course, I mean, there's a need for drip for Nigeria as it is presently. Here we're seeing that bakers and caterers are saying they will go on strike, Richard. Of course, you know how much flour is in the market right now. Not even talk about other things that are needed, for example, the butter and the rest that you need to make. I mean, I was shocked the last time I needed to make a little snack at home, and then just for me to get to hear that, I mean, it's almost 700 naira, just one of the small sachet butter that you need to use. And I was like, okay, now I see the reason why bakers are actually increasing the price, and then you see bread of 500, 1000, and then even the household
quality is low,
very very low. So that is to tell you, I mean, and we've seen that. I mean, this is not even happening this year. It started way back last year. The quality of some of these things, even the biscuits and the rest that we see, even going down. How much do we now buy all of these pastas that we normally consume, and noodles? How much do they go for right now? I think we saw that was the last week or so, how much noodles cost right now, a carton of it. So a lot of things are really going south, and I just hope that the government, here we're seeing that the government is trying their best to see what they can do, but I mean, as it is present, Nigerians cannot even feel the impact. So just like we're seeing the federal government telling the opposition governors, and I think it's not just for the opposition governors, but for every governor to actually look into how can you actually come to the aid of your own indigene in your own state, your citizens. How are you planning to do something beyond what the federal government is going to do? What are you planning to do? I'm happy seeing Enugu doing something for security, and others. We saw Lagos and other states trying their best, because when you talk about security, it will really help to make sure that there is good food, and then there's food availability for everybody to eat. So we'll just keep our fingers crossed. Labour is there with strikes, so a number of things are happening. So definitely Nigeria is in ICU, and it really needs to be jacked up and come back to life again.
I mean, for presidents not having first degree, I think is lowering our standard selling. Of course, not a first class. Nobody needs to have a first class. Nobody needs to have whether second class, upper or lower. But I'm saying they can, because the Daily Sun here is saying first degree, that
Mm.
is they have to have at least HND, or
The
a
first degree,
BSc,
yeah, or
whatever, bachelor, or yeah,
mm-hmm.
first degree. I believe is lowering the standard of the education of who is going to. We're talking about President Selem,
Mm.
not local government chairman. Is the president of Nigeria. Why would you think it's not important for the president to have a first degree? It's so many things. It is not about that he knows book, but it's also that he has been through the system and know what the system is like. That is very important. I believe is very, very important. And beginning to say you don't think is trying to pass a bill that they shouldn't have a first degree. These are certain standards that I shouldn't think we should start compromising when we are supposed to be, taking our educational game to the next level, when you're supposed to be taking qualification to the next level, when we're supposed to be mindful that, what, our leaders know what they're doing, they're educated, they're literate, they are, intelligent and all of that. And then here you are beginning to say that, what, they don't even have to have a first degree and all of that. I have a different opinion about it. Definitely, what level of course, not a pass. It don't have to be first class. It
Or
doesn't have to
second,
be
yeah.
upper or lower, but let them have a first degree. And of course, it must not be a BSc. It can be a HND. It can be a postgraduate, whatever qualification. But I think that a first degree is important. We can't sit down and then say that we want
Mm.
Nigeria to be the giant of Africa, and then we are in a world leaders gathering, and then our president has an OND, and then no, we know that for sure his level of intellectual will not be as high as others, because the world is evolving. We need someone that is up to the task when it comes to knowing what he is doing, and you have to be there. Maybe we should even have professors as presidents.
I mean,
It
it won't be a
doesn't
bad idea.
it's not a bad
Of
idea, Selem,
course.
but let's stop lowering our standards. For
Mm,
me,
true.
that's the bottom line. We should stop lowering our standards just because they know. Some of them know they don't have this qualification, and they don't want it to discredit them tomorrow, because I see no reason why we should start compromising the qualification of the president of the country
Well,
and then keep
of course,
offices.
of
There's
course.
no need for that,
Mm.
in my
No,
opinion.
of course, Rachel. I mean, if we're talking about the president, it's
Mm, it,
mandatory for
it
me.
is.
The reason why I initially I didn't even get it was a first degree, but the fact that say for contesting elections. So I was looking
Yeah.
at various
Mm,
offices for election, but
yeah.
I think we should break it down. Our president, our
Uh,
governors, down to
exactly.
the local government chairman.
Yes.
Maybe we should have a different way. What
Mm,
should be the criteria for running for the
exactly.
president?
True.
So even though they have rejected that bill, and I keep saying there are certain bills that have been rejected, and you just can't help to wonder, maybe because it's going to actually affect some people's offices,
It's
that is why they are
possible.
refusing.
Yeah.
So Rachel, we'll just keep our fingers crossed on that. Well, let's take a look at the Punch newspaper. Another Punch newspaper starting with a big story on costs of living. Federal government NLC meeting deadlocked. Bakers threaten shutdown. With the riders, strike will go ahead. Federal government negotiation not fruitful. NLC leaders insist. Still on the Punch newspaper, federal government warn against unrealistic demands as Labour seek yearly pay rise. Detail of that can be found on page 2. Still on the issue of the wingway, we are having crash report ready March. Kingsmere declare 8-day mourning. We saw that yesterday in some of the papers that were saying they need his corpse to be brought back to the country because they want him to be buried in his own homeland. So you can follow up that story inside the paper. Showing cattle deliver Punch 50th anniversary lecture February 29th. You can find more detail of that on page 5. Tinubu leave Eagles land houses. Tinubu gifts Eagles land houses national honors after AFCON detail found inside the paper. Track bandits with biometric system, Senate tells security chiefs. Track bandits with biometric system, Senate tells security chiefs. Buhari's signature forged to withdraw $6.2 million from the CBN coming from the ex-secretary of the Federation. Customers tired of estimated bidding, federal government tell discos. We saw that from yesterday where there will be a sanction for non-performing discos. So You can follow up more detail of that story inside the paper on page 32, and that's all on the Punch newspaper.
On Nigerian News Direct, Seplat Energy achieved ISO 26,000 endorsement on social responsibility. $6.2 million fraud, ex-SGF accuses Emefiele of forgery. Naira depreciates further to 1,534 naira to a dollar on the NAFEX. You can find details on page 10. Federal government to create additional land banks commodity board to tackle food inflation. Coming from Vice President Shetima. The big story, gas economy. Federal government declares tax waivers, orders for companies involved in gas pipeline construction. AFCON 2023 Tinubu rewards Super Eagles with national honor and land gates. We are on course to register 200 million SMEs. This is coming from the CAC Registrar General. You can find details on page 2, and that's all the news on Nigerian News Direct.
On the Vanguard newspaper, the big story is still on hardship. Federal government tackles PDP governors and others. With the writer, there's a lot of hunger and anger in the land coming from the governors. PDP governors are playing to the gallery, and then this is coming from the federal government. PDP stating the obvious APC has ruined our economy, coming from Labour Party. Suffering pushing Nigeria to the brink, PDP Board of Trustees tells Tinubu. Confirms Wabara as the Board of Trustee chairman, appoints Makari the secretary. You can find more detail of that in the paper. Asagba of Asaba, Chike Ozuki passes on at 100. And on Ondo Guba, Adehusa carpets PDP governors over ADCON delegate election. Why I didn't appeal delegate Congress outcome, you can find more detail of that on page 39. Buhari's signature forged to withdraw $6.2 million from the CBN, still coming from Boss Mustafa. Federal government declares the CBN staff and others wanted for forging Buhari's signature. And we have the pictures here where we're seeing Vanguard Personality of the Year. You can do well to grab the paper and read more detail of any other story that is of interest to you.
On the Matrix newspaper, $6.23 million fraud. Presidency writes Interpol requests arrest of CBN staff and 2 others. Federal government treats Super Eagles to welcome breakfast in Abuja. Mounting insecurity, Senate charges service chiefs on synergy. Akpabio mandate Minister of Finance to immediately release funds to military to battle insecurity. The big story on the paper, Falana fires World Bank and IMF. Asks federal government to jettison deleterious programs, policies of IMF and World Bank. Says there is no country where government don't give subsidies. Warns federal government against reliance on economic predictions, policies of IMF and World Bank. Urges Nigeria to join BRICS, sell crude oil in Naira. How rising production costs forces Nigerian breweries to announce price hike. Why 2024 Nigerian budget is insufficient to boost economy amid Naira devaluation. This reports coming from experts. Wike Lekpobiri pay condolence visit to Wiwe's family. Details can be found on page 3. We have Portable's wife speak on suffering domestic violence as photos of assault flood social media. You can find details on page 15. You owe Nigerians an explanation on how increased allocations were spent. Presidency fires back at PDP governors. NUPRC poised to end gas flaring by 2030, zero carbon emission by 2060. And that's all the news on the Matrix newspaper.
Richard, when I saw Falana flying back at the World Bank and IMF, I remember there was a time you made mention of the fact that it's not everything that comes from the IMF that the government needs to embrace it and swallow it hook and sinker, because some of these predictions that comes might not actually sit well with us. And I remember when we were looking at an interview that was done to the former president in 2016, and where we saw when he was being advised to flood the naira, and he said the only countries that normally flood the naira are countries that are actually stabilized.
Yes.
So they actually have the luxury of flooding their own currency. but we cannot float our own
We
currency
can.
because of the situations that are on ground. We do not have the infrastructures, we do not have what is needed. And a number of Nigerians were expecting the president then to, okay, since you said we do not have all of the infrastructures and other things, to put all of these things in place so that it will be convenient for us to now float our own currency. But we didn't see that going on. And then we now have Tinubu coming into the government and then floating the naira. And then here we're seeing that every day we wake up to our currency depreciating. Today is 1,450, another day it's almost getting to 2,000, and then it keeps going, and then it's not stable in the market. What you get in the morning is different from what you get in the afternoon. And then we remember when we now saw IMF saying that we should start paying, they should remove the subsidy, not only for fuel but also for electricity.
Yeah.
And here we're saying, Father, of course, we've said it here, and I remember you saying the fact that almost every country, even the developed countries,
Yes.
they pay subsidy to some extent to
They
actually
do.
help their own citizens to be able to buy
Yeah.
it. So why is IMF now advising Nigeria to remove subsidy? Already we've seen what the removal of the fuel subsidy is doing to Nigerians, and then imagine when you are paying higher again for electricity, and then we mentioned the fact that it's not even available. You hardly even see power, so not to talk about paying a higher price. So I really think at this point I'm supporting Falana. Before we take anything coming from the World Bank or the IMF, we have to look at our own economy presently. What is peculiar to us? We are not like every other country. We are still struggling, crawling like a baby. So we really need to look into what suits us. What can we do? Have we put all that is needed? We've been shouting here, Richard, talking about let us fix our refineries, let us sell it in naira, and we're not. I mean, we went for BRICS last year, and we're not even part of the
We're
countries.
not. We're not.
So what are we saying? Who are we kidding? So I am hoping that whenever we see predictions coming from all of this World Bank and IMF, let us look at what can we do. How can we handle things in our own way before we begin to take in advice coming from everybody that really don't have an idea what is happening in the country presently?
When it comes to IMF relationship with Nigeria, I believe is what we usually say see finish in Nigeria. I believe so, because there's so much in our business, Sele, that you wonder. Today they're predicting that, tomorrow they're predicting this and saying all sorts of things. And I am hoping, but then it looks like the government is listening to the IMF because we floated the naira, and then that was a bad decision. So like countries that float are those that are stable. When you put the importer and the exporter window, it means your currency is in demand. The question is the naira in demand? If the naira is in demand, we will not be having this free fall. What is in demand is the dollar. The naira is not in demand, and we know why it's not in demand. Because we're a consuming country rather than a producing country. So we are not exporting. Our balance of trade is not balanced. We are on deficits and not on surplus and all of that. So why would you float a currency and leave importers and exporters to now? It could have been favorable to us if our export outweighs our importation. Then we will have an edge over floating it, because then now we will determine, because our naira is a big shot in the game and is in demand. So why would you listen to IMF and all of that saying things like that, and then you agree? Well, they suggested for subsidy removal. You did the same thing, and I'm hoping that shouldn't happen concerning electricity subsidy, because it's going to be very, very chaotic if it's eventually been removed and all of that. And the little businesses that are hanging in may no longer be able to hang in again and be able to do the needful. So I just finish, and I'll just keep saying it's just see finish when it comes to the IMF. Go and tell other countries to do that, and because they know that the Nigerian government is listening to them to some extent. They keep saying it, and then to some, and we were just having so much chaos economically, just like Falana said, and thank God it's something we've said over and over on the show, is that, you know what, subsidy is not a bad thing. It's not. Let's stop making subsidy look like it's a bad thing. Subsidy is not a bad
It's
thing.
actually the people who are hiding under the
That
subsidy.
is what
and
the government is all about. That is why we have government schools. It's for subsidized education with a high quality. It's unfortunate that there's no quality of education
any longer.
That is why we have government hospitals. It's for subsidized health care services and quality ones. That is why we have that is why the government supposed to be in charge of communication. That is why they're supposed to be in charge of water
Transport
supply.
and all
They're
of
supposed
that.
to have transport and all of that. All of these government-owned facilities and services and goods and products are out there is for the masses to be able to have access to quality services and in subsidized rate. That is why a government is there in the first place. That is why we're a mixed economy. And that is why we have the government there. And so why do we keep making it look like when you subsidize is a bad thing to do as a government? No, the problem is that we have been subsidizing for too long, and what we are supposed to do in the country to take us to the level where we will no longer need subsidy in certain areas, we are not doing it. We have left our refineries to suffer for so long that instead of while we were busy subsidizing, we're building our refineries, having them functional, then we will get to the point where we're no longer importing oil because we're now producing it within our countries, and then the government did not do the work that is needed. That is the problem in Nigeria, Sele. Not that subsidy is a bad thing. So I'm just grateful that we have a louder voice talking about it, and just, you know what, telling the government to do the needful, and we will be here also emphasizing on what we can concerning what the government should do and then the way forward.
It looks as if we are the only ones backing up Falana, even though I know other people are also doing the same. But I'm hoping that the people who are supposed to be speaking are not speaking, Rachel.
Yeah.
That is what is hurtful about this. Imagine if we have bigger bodies that have bigger platforms talking about it, especially coming from government. You make mention, I mean, we have all of this government infrastructures to help Nigerians, but it's quite unfortunate that almost everything the private sector is taking. Just walk into any hotel that is owned by the government, you'll be surprised at some of the facilities that are available. There's no water, the ACs are not working, and quite a number of things. So you have to look for something better. So who are we deceiving initially? So I am hoping that Nigerian government don't listen to this, because this is going to be a suicide mission, except if they are ready to take it on their conscience, that they are responsible for what is going to happen to Nigerians after that. If not, they shouldn't take that advice, Rachel. Well, before we move further with other paper analysis, we'd love to take a break, let you chew all of the stories that we have seen and even more. And when we come back, we'll continue with the analysis. Please stay tuned with us.
Make your everyday informative, make your everyday count. Know your world, daily affairs, national and international, with authentic news events as they unfold on Global News and Zoom on Nigeria, Monday to Friday at 1 p.m.
Thank you for staying tuned. It's still the Dailies. We have been looking at a number of stories on the paper. We see Falana replying to what IMF and World Bank is saying concerning the Nigerian government removing subsidy for electricity as well. And then many other stories. We have also seen the picture story where we saw the Super Eagles and the award they got from the president, houses, and many other things to actually appreciate them for their effort during the AFCON 2023, together with many other stories on the paper. So we would love to hear what your own views are. You can drop them on Facebook and on YouTube. I still have Rachel Tanzi with me. Thank you, Rachel.
You're welcome, Sarah.
All right, let's take a look at the next paper, which is the Daily Independent newspaper. Democracy would die in Nigeria if PDP collapses. This is coming from the party board of trustees, telling Tinubu's situation in Nigeria has become unbearable. We don't have intention of selling PDP. This is coming from Bauchi governor. And still on AFCON, Tinubu award Super Eagles with MON award landed property and flat. Super Eagles attribute success to solidarity, Nigerians, and support. You can find detail of that inside the paper. The big story, federal government asks for more time as Labour insists on strike ultimatum. Promises to fast-track implementation of 16-point agreement. Minimum wage should be reviewed annually, coming from the NLC president. Stakeholders point ways to promote fair resolution of disputes. You can find detail inside the paper. And on the alert, $6.2 million election fraud. The ex-SGF Mustafa exonerates self, says Buhari didn't okay the fund. And also we're having Niger Republic retaliates ban Nigerian flight from airspace. And on rising insecurity, Senate grills security chiefs over 5 hours. Rep step down bill to make varsity degree minimum qualification for office of the president and governors. Now, this paper has actually narrowed it down for the president and governors. Now we're seeing that government molds commodity board to tackle price volatility and others, to deploy security forces to protect farmers and farmlands. And also we have Asagbe in council confirmed transaction of monarchs in storages. Detail found on page 6, and that's all on Daily Independent newspaper.
On New Telegraph newspaper, the big story, Japa, 42,000 nurses, midwives left Nigeria in 3 years. This is a report from NIMCN. Says average nurse earn 135,000 monthly. Currency in circulation rises by 21.77% to 3.65 trillion naira, a report from CBN. Federal government molds registration of social media content creators with CAC. This is for tax. You can find details on page 7. APC maintains majority status in Senate as Akpabio swears in 3 new senators. Access Holdings appoint Bolaji Abede as acting GCEO. Federal government to resume wage award payments this week. And on insecurity, Benue youth protest killing and demand government action. Eagles get land and national honors. You can find details on page 31. And on sachet alcohol ban, 5 million jobs at risk, says union. I thought it was 500,000 jobs, and now we are seeing 5 million jobs. You can find details on page 29. Seek God's face, pray for leaders, show love, Khan advises church. Nigerians are hungry and angry, Bishop tells Tinubu. And then hardship becoming unbearable, the statement from PDP. You're part of Nigeria's problem, federal government tells PDP governors. Federal government molds commodity board to check rising food prices, to deploy security forces to protect farmers and secure farmland. And at the downside of the paper, we have a study. Avoiding meat lowers prostate cancer side effects. You can find details on page 6, and that's all the news on New Telegraph newspaper.
Wow, Richard, a big story. I mean, I think we saw that from yesterday, where we saw the protests coming from our nurses. And then here we're seeing the number of nurses who have left just in 3 years. And more will be leaving, Richard. In fact, as we're talking, I'm sure others are processing their papers.
Maybe one is at the airport at the
already to leave. That is just how things are right now. So maybe we'll have to start recording it by minute, by hour, by days, and so we get to know what is really happening, because I'm sure that there are others who have left that the figures are not yet captured. So this is maybe a rough estimate. About 42,000 have left. And then what are we doing? Remember what we saw on Monday on the paper concerning the fact that by 2030, what is going to happen? We'll be lacking about 10 million health workers. And as it is presently, Nigeria is already lacking. Richard, because you go to the hospital, the doctor will tell you he's tired and he will leave. The nurses will be angry when they are supposed to look for your vein. They will be playing with your hand. And then we are seeing that right now, when you go to the lab, most of our, instead of having professional lab technicians over there, you'll be having IT people actually being the ones to look for your vein. And sometimes even giving you certain things that they are not supposed to do, or they don't even know what to do. that is just saying that we are shorthand.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that honestly, each time I see things, you say anything that has to do with health, education is something that I really think the Nigerian government should not play with it,
They
because
shouldn't.
once we do not have education, we are breeding criminals eventually. Because if you are not busy in class, you're busy training something or learning something different. That was where Boko Haram came from, the instance where they were fighting education, but as it is right now, they're even taking advantage of the technology more than the Nigerian government. And then here we're talking about health. So I'm actually hoping that when we see statistics like this on our paper, it's actually alarming, and I hope that the government will really take that to heart and actually do something concerning that. Well, let's take a look at the next paper, which is the first newspaper. We have federal government to resume payment of 35,000 wage award to public workers. More detail found inside the first newspaper. Drug addicts now find alternative in corpses bowls. This is really a sad one. I hope that the government will do something about that. Maybe since they have taken away their 30% alcohol sachet drinks, they are resolving to other things now. So something should be done about that. How to strengthen the Naira by Lagos Assembly. And also the big story here, forged document used to withdraw the $6.2 million cash from CBN vault. This is coming from the former Secretary General of the Federation. Says Buhari's signature was forged to perpetrate the fraud. More detail of that can be found inside the paper. And coming from the Vice President, federal government will set up commodity board to regulate food prices. We'll be looking forward to that. Reps to probe state and FEC allocation utilization. Tinubu confers national honor on Super Eagles, and also we are seeing account for how you spend increased revenue. Federal government tells PDP governors as party confirm Wubara Board of Trustee Chair, McCarthy as the secretary, and that's all on First News newspaper.
On Sweet Crude Report, the big story, Nigeria loses 891 billion naira to gas flaring in 2023. Oil firms burn 275.2 BSCF of gas. Shell, Chevron, ExxonMobil, major offenders. Flared gas can generate 27,500 GW power. And then this is a report coming from NOSDRA. We can start with the details on the front page. First LNG-powered vessel arrives Lekki Port with 14,000 containers. Capital importation into Nigeria's oil sector dips by 61% to $1.6 million. Tinubu moves crude oil sales revenue from NNPC to CBN. Nigeria, Morocco seek first track for $25 billion JV gas pipeline project. You can find details on page 15. China-Nigeria trade hits $22.6 billion. And that's all the news on Sweet Crude Reports.
On the Business Times newspaper, we see here coming from Apampa, we need improved process of export at Nigerian ports. Presidency requests Interpol to apprehend 3 suspects. Buhari didn't authorize $6.2 million payment to foreign election observers, says Mustafa. And the big story, Nigerians banking industry lifts economy by 96.2 trillion naira. Credit to government rises by 36.6% to 33.669 trillion naira, detail found on page 2. UK signed landmark partnership with Nigeria to boost trade and investment. Federal government mulls establishment of commodity board over rising food prices. While many state governments shun capital market financing for key projects. And coming from the NUPRC boss, he said Nigeria's potential can produce 2.2 million oil barrel per day. We look forward to seeing more of that inside the paper. And that's all on the Business Times newspaper.
On Business Day newspaper, the big story, CBN sells dollars for first time in 5 months to stabilize Naira. More businesses seen shutting down as uncertainties mount. Petrol landing costs hit 1,000 naira to a litre on FX crisis. 4 ways Nigeria can halt surging food prices. And on Valentine's Day, cost of living crisis in Nigeria, love now cost a thing. You can find details on page 31. Picture story still showing the Super Eagles with the president and the vice president, and that's all the news on Business Day newspaper.
On the leadership, we have Access Holding appoints Bolaji as the acting GCEO. You can find detail on page 25. 9,671 ground rent defaulters to lose land coming from the FCTA. And what's trending, we have federal government places 2 million naira bounty on lawyer who assaults maid. This goes over bill 7.1 million unmetered customers. You can find more detail of that inside the paper. CBN makes FX Forex market intervention in 5 months, sells $86 million. You can find more detail on page 12. Investigator writes Interpol places 3 on watch list. You can find more detail on page 12. And we have on the IMF advice, don't remove electricity subsidy. Labour tells Tinubu. Says Nigerians yet to recover from fuel subsidy removal. Declares IMF and World Bank anti-people forces. It will dehumanize Nigerians. Experts are warning the federal government. So you can find more detail on page 4. Bandits killed 2 policemen, 2 others, and abduct 14 in Zamfara. This happened yesterday, where we saw that they actually killed 2 policemen and then got away with their arms in the police station. And then they killed 2 people and then were able to abduct about 40. So they kept shooting so that nobody would come close to them. And I think more needs to be done, even though we have the local policing over there in Zafra, which was newly launched. We have other security body over there, but then yet we're still seeing insecurity thriving in those places. So I'm hoping the government will do really something about this, because we're beginning to see that these bandits are running short of arms, and that is why they're beginning to target the police station to get more arms, and they have more sophisticated weapons. We keep saying that over and over. So we hope that the government will go to the tail of this, the root of this issue, so that we can actually have a Nigeria and then other things can fall in place. And then on the international world, coming from Gaza, Palestinian envoy insists on 2-state solution. You can find more detail of that on page 12. Minister faults PDP governors on the economy. You can find detail of that on page 18. And that's all on leadership newspaper.
On Punch Sport Extra, Tinubu gives Eagles national honors, lands, houses in Abuja. Bavarians battle at Studio Olympiaco. This is on Champions League. We're seeing Bayern Munich and Lazio. And then we have Diaz strike ends Los Blancos away win. This is we're having Real Madrid versus Leipzig. Eagles will be back, says Iheanacho. Osimhen to arrive Napoli today. Mbappe coy over Madrid offer. Enzo denies Chelsea exit rumors. City can retain champions league. This is from their coach Pep Guardiola. At the downside of the paper, we have Radcliffe takeover approved by EPL. And on cyberbullying, Nigeria risks losing players. You can find details on page 7. And then the big story, we have King Kong or King Ekong, the zero to hero story of AFCON 2023 most valuable player. And that's all the news on Sponge Sports Extra.
We are looking at King Kong. It reminds me of the movie King Kong. So,
Yes,
I mean, we wish him all the best. Well, thank you, Rachel, for doing this.
You're
with
welcome,
me.
Sarah.
And also, thank you to our viewers and supporters for keeping a date with us. And thank you for making us part of your morning. Until we come your way tomorrow, do have a blessed day ahead.